In this lesson, we're going to finish building the body of our ship. Alright, so let's get started here. In the last lesson, we had left off where we needed to create this detail in the fuselage itself. Now, we have most of the geometry to get us started. We just need to add just a little bit more to create that shape. So, to get started with this, let's go ahead and go to vertex mode. Let's show end result, make sure that that is on. And we're going to use connect and linear on our refine. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our front view by hitting F on the keyboard and then Alt X to make that see-through. And then we're going to cut from this edge to here, and we're just going to follow along that line on our reference image. So we're just going to go straight across, and then we're going to right click on that. And then I also want to terminate from here to there. So let's go ahead and right click, refine connect, go from this vertex to this one, and there we go. So we've created the segments there, and now we just need to define that geometry by adjusting these vertices and putting them into the correct position. So the first ones that I need to adjust are going to be these vertices right across the front here. They are going to be creating a flat surface right out here on the front for the canopy to rest upon. So if I go to my front view, I'm going to grab these vertices right in here, and I'm just going to drag those straight down in the Y. Now you'll notice that the geometry is changing a little bit, and we're having a little bit of an issue with some curved lines and things like that. And it's kind of confusing because the lines look good, but why is everything curving? And why does it look like it's welding together? Well, what's happening is the surface modifier is causing these vertices to weld together because they are within this threshold. So if we drop this threshold down to something like 0.5, you'll notice that it comes back. So let's go back to vertex mode here, and everything is just fine. Alright, so now that we have that flattened out and everything is looking pretty good, I want to make sure that this is very close to being perfectly flat. It doesn't have to be exact, but we want to be fairly close. We might have a little bit of a raised edge right here. So actually we'll go ahead and we'll lift that up just a little bit, just to kind of show a little bit of a transition there. Okay, and we're following that line. We know that that line is correct. So how do we get the flat top right here? We know that this is kind of a raised edge. Well, we need to take this geometry and match that up with this top geometry. So we're going to take this vertex, and I'm going to hit Alt X, and I'm just going to drag that straight up in the Y there, and I'm going to try to keep a consistent space between these two edges. Go to this one, drag that straight up. Now this is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to actually drag this over to here a little bit closer, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing right here. And then this one, oops, let's make sure we marquee select around that. We'll just drag that straight up. And again, trying to keep that consistent space between the edges. Alright, so now let's take a look at what we have. We're hitting P on the keyboard and holding down Alt and the middle mouse button to orbit. And there we have the shape of our fuselage. Okay, so looking really good at this point. You can make some minor adjustments to some of the shapes if you need to, but overall I'm really happy with the shape. I think I'm going to pull the base out just a little bit more though, right here, just to kind of give it more of a definitive shape that follows along with the rest of the shape of the fuselage. But that looks pretty good. Alright, so let's go to our top view. Let's make sure that this matches up. And it does look pretty good. Let's hit Alt X, and I'm pretty happy with how that is shaped. Whenever you hit Alt X, don't be confused with some of the geometry. So as you see here, I was checking this vertex here. It didn't look quite right to me, so I hit Alt X and I realized that that's a vertex along the bottom. And that's not something that I really need to worry about. Alright, so now let's hit P on the keyboard And let's build out the rest of our ship here. Now you're probably wondering, well, we just took a couple of lessons just to create this part. How are we going to build out the rest of the body here? Well, we have the major shapes to create this body already for us. So all we have to do is clone them and then attach everything together. So we're using the same techniques here. So let's go to edge mode, and I want to get rid of these edges along the center. I know that I don't need those anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that out. And then I'm also going to get rid of this one, so I'm going to delete that. Alright, so now that I have deleted those, I'm going to go to vertex mode, and I want to check something along my center line before we move on. I want to select these vertices, and I just want to make sure that it's only 2 vertices on these. Okay. Now, if you need to make sure that they are together, you can always fuse them. And what fuse will do is take the vertices that are selected and put them right on top of one another. And then we could use weld and make sure that your threshold is at 0.1, so that way you know that you're only welding vertices that are right on top of one another. And what that will do is weld the vertices together that are selected, and it will only weld those that have kind of an isolated geometry or isolated vertex. So an isolated vertex is a vertex that really isn't changing the shape of any edge. It's kind of out there and it needs to be removed anyway. So I'm just checking that center line and just hitting weld to do that. Okay, and that's going to be along those edges that we just deleted those segments out of. So this is the last one. Weld that. And that looks good. And we have one more down here. You remember we deleted this edge here, or that segment here, and then also the one across the canopy. So 2 vertices selected, and we want to weld. And I'm only worried about this along the center line. Don't have to worry about it the rest of the way. Okay? Well, let's go ahead and select these 2. Let's weld those. And if they can't be welded, it won't allow them to weld. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm hitting weld, and it's not welding those. So I know that they're okay. All right, great. So now, let's go ahead and go to segment mode, and let's select these segments right here along this center, or along the back where we stopped. Now with these selected, let's hold down Shift, and let's drag that out. And I'm going to drag it to right to this point right here. Notice how it's creating that new segment, and what we can do is use refine and just connect the edges and create a surface. So before we do that, let's go ahead and create the rest of the segments we need to build out to the tail. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and we're going to drag that out right to here, and then we will adjust these vertices as we need to. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this out, and I'm going to go ahead and keep this right there for now. And then we're going to drag out one more out to this corner. Okay. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to rotate these to where they're going to match up with the rest of our geometry. So I'm just going to move that back, and you'll see that these points meet, and let's go ahead and scale those. So in my perspective view, hitting P on the keyboard, I'm going to scale this in all 3 directions. And I'm going to go back to my front view, and I'm just going to check to see if that matches up. That's fairly close. That's looking good. Okay, let's go to our front view. Let's go ahead and grab this guy. And this one's going to be a little bit different. I am going to rotate this. And I'm going to move this into place. But with this one, I'm going to do just a little bit differently. I'm not going to scale that up. I'm just going to grab these vertices along the top, and I'm going to drag those up into this corner here. May have to adjust these vertices just to kind of straighten that up a little bit more. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to drag that straight up to where that meets. And there we go. So I have these edges that I can start working on, and I can build out the rest of the body. Now if you want, we could also take those edges and we could build out the tail as well. So I'm going to go ahead and grab all of those segments there. Or actually, I'm just going to grab that line, or the segments there, I'm sorry. Now let's make sure that we get all of these. And you could probably go to spline. Let's just do that. Let's grab those segments. I'm going to go to my front view. I'm going to hold Shift, drag that out right to here, and I'm going to scale that. Right along the center. And then I'm going to move that to where it matches up to this corner. And then I'm going to hold Shift and drag out to the tail. Now I can't see that in my view here. So I'm just going to have to kind of guess where that's at. And then shrink that down to about the size that I'm thinking that the end of the tail is going to be. So I think that's going to be pretty close. So we'll do something like that. Now again, we can always adjust this, so don't worry if it looks a little off. Okay. Now the pieces that we scaled, a couple of issues that we're going to have with that. They're not going to match that center line. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go to vertex mode, and actually we'll have to go to our spline mode really quickly, and we'll have to match these up. Let me go ahead and pull that back. And I'm going to go to vertex mode here. And on this one, I'm just going to pull that toward the center. Now it may not be exact by any means, but we can get fairly close. And we can make adjustments as we need to. Alright. So now that we have that, let's go to vertex mode. And let's refine this. So go to Connect, Linear, Refine. Let's go ahead and get our center line finished. So I'm going to click here, go to this point, all the way down, and we're just going to follow. And there we go. And then we'll right click. It created that line, and let's just continue on down. Right click, Refine, Connect. And after we connect all of these vertices at this point, we are going to notice that it creates a surface. So we know that we're doing this correctly. Okay. Just connecting these points. There we go. Now there are other types of modeling out there, and we're going to get into the next type of modeling after we have finished this out. We're going to get into creating the vents that you see on the side of the plane, or the VTOL, and we're going to use what's called the box modeling method, where we start out with a primitive and we start to edit that in a way to get the shape that we're looking for. And again, we started out with spline modeling because it's the best way, in my mind, to learn how topology works and how geometry is supposed to be created inside of 3D. So we always want to strive for quads or triangles, so I really stress that. And I think that if you get an idea of how topology is supposed to flow, it gives you a very strong foundation on how to become a modeler in 3D. Alright, now the final one here. Having a little bit of an issue with that plane along the bottom, so I'm going to hit Alt and Q to isolate this object, and then I'm going to refine, connect, this bottom portion here. And then we're going to right click, and there we go. So now we have our fuselage has been built. We have the body built here, so I'm going to hit Alt Q to go out of isolation mode. So there's the body, and now we are ready to start building out the vents that you see right here along our fuselage. So I'll see you in the next lesson.